These 40 tracks are only a fraction of the Hawks' overall output, but given that by 1963, the tenor had become perhaps the most important jazz instrument, that's also part of Coleman Hawkins' achievement. Tonight, we're going to cover Hawkins, the retrospective 1929 to 1963. Welcome to the Unconnoisseur.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah, that was awesome. You're earning your keep now.
I hope so. It's about time.
It's about time.
You guys,
So, yeah, retrospective album. That means 40 tracks, like you said. That's a lot of music to listen to.
It is a lot. It's here's the cool part though. You know, being that we're on the journey here, we had to improvise a little bit this week because I had to buy the CD so that we could even listen to it. So that's how Drew and I decided that we were going to do it, and we switched around a couple of artists. So we listened to
Yeah, in our personal journey last year,
yeah.
we skipped 2 whole weeks
Yeah.
as we waited for this album to come in so we could listen to it.
Yeah.
And that is a reminder. You're not going to find it on YouTube. You're not going to find it on iTunes. You're not going to find it on Spotify.
Right.
You will have to find one physically or check out the playlist that will be up right above Dad's head for the Coleman Hawkins Experience. Like the Brady Bunch, other side of your head, Dad. There's a story. We'll put the link to the a YouTube video up there. I'll just run the 2 albums as 2 separate albums, full length, so you can check it out. But 40 tracks, 2 albums.
that explains a lot because I've been listening to Coleman Hawkins all week, and I thought, well, I'll find retrospective today or yesterday, and I was upset. I was just disturbed that where is it? Why I typed it in, I put it in, and it gave me everything but a retrospective.
Mm-hmm.
So it was blowing my mind. You guys blow my mind.
Yeah. Well, and again on the journey, we've had to improvise a couple of times. Loose Tubes, you know, number 100 that we did. I had to buy the record and have that shipped over from England. So even though there was some Loose Tubes on YouTube, the week when we first started, you know, we were completely winging it. But it wasn't until much later that we got to hear the full album of Loose Tubes anyways. So that's just one example of, you know, a little speech
Jazz
on our
Jazz Warriors. We had to go source that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there've been a few of them. This is a tougher one to find.
Yeah.
It was released RCA Bluebird. And really you had to have a copy of it if you're going to get a copy of it.
Pretty much.
So
Let me ask you, Drew, how was your weekend music?
it was jam-packed with stuff. We're coming into Christmas time, so obviously at the bike shop, we're slinging bikes like nobody's business, and I've been building them as fast as they go out the door. Yesterday, I think I told you I had 7 hours. I actually had 9 hours, but 7 hours of uninterrupted music listening. So I got to listen to the Coleman Hawkins and, of course, this week's artist, which is a big collection of 4 hours of music. So undisturbed, I got to build bikes and listen to music. But more importantly, on Tuesday night of this week, Lily and I went to El Mercado in South Austin, where we got to experience the Ernie DeWalwa night. He's the resident professional drummer. He just celebrated his 82nd birthday just the week before. Up there drumming away, and he's got a great blues band. The bass guitarist sitting in was Chris Alcaraz, so I was super excited to see him there that night. But then it is the Sax Extravaganza night. So once a month, there will be Ernie DeWalwa Band, and an hour of the night or more is dedicated to saxophones. This week, 3 tenors and Joe Morales on alto. What an experience. I want to put a clip up here in a little bit, but what was so cool about that night is watching 4 saxophone players start on a tune that nobody knew what they were going to do. A lot of free jazz happened in that first minute, and then they'd look around and somebody would blow a melody, and they'd all just kind of like in sync, bang. They'd all hit the melody together, all harmonizing together. They all played. It was such a spectacular night to watch at El Mercado in South Austin for Sax Extravaganza at the Ernie DeWarwa Tuesday nights. It's been a great week.
I have 2 questions for you. First question is, do they rehearse before? So do you think they rehearse that little skit and say, okay, We're going to start off free jazz and then boom, we'll go right in here? No,
because what I understand is they don't know exactly which players are going to be there.
Okay.
And these are of the top echelon. I wish I had the names in front of me. I'll put them on screen later. Top echelon sax players from throughout the area. So no, they don't know what they're doing.
Okay.
Joe called out one, give me a cumbia beat. And all of a sudden they're playing about a minute in and somebody throws a La Bamba out there. So they all play La Bamba. But nobody knows what they're going to do until they reach that moment of, oh, that sounds like this would fit really well here.
So basically it's a professional jam session.
Yes, it is.
Professional sax.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question. You said Ernie DeWawa is a drum player? Because to me, it sounds like he should be a trumpet player. Wah, wah, wah,
wah, wah. I'll ask him about that when I see him this summer.
My question would be, how do you spell his last name?
Durawa. Durawa.
Oh, Durawa. Okay.
Something like that. Does that sound right? Durawa.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That sounds good. Dad, how was your weekend music?
Oh, man, I got to tell you, last Tuesday, Mom and I went to the Fort Wayne area community band Christmas concert. Over 100 musicians on a stage at the Hour Auditorium at Purdue Fort Wayne, and it blew me away. One of the guys in our Bible study group, Jim, plays the baritone, and at one piece he had to start the piece off as a solo, and then during another piece he had another solo piece, and the guy, he's good. He's really good. And the whole thing was just spectacular. And at one point, they brought a man up to conduct the second half of the performance, probably at least 80 years old. And this guy has a pedigree that's just as long as could be, including a worship leader at what would be First Missionary Church. And he did an outstanding job of conducting the orchestra. And then he called up a flugelhorn player and a sax player. And I would like to have been able to forward that to you guys. Don't know how to do that yet, but you would be so inspired to hear this flugelhorn, a guy who's probably 70 years old anyway, and he blew such a melodious tone. And then the sax player would, typically do, the sax player, then the flugelhorn, then the sax, then they played some duet stuff. And that was just, it was so inspiring. You guys would have loved really the whole concert, but especially the duet.
Yeah. Was it all Christmas music?
Yes. And one of the pieces they did, the conductor said, now this is going to have a Dave Brubeck take 5 kind of style to it. And it did. It's like, wow, this was really cool. I'm telling you, I was inspired.
I saw you clapping. Yeah. Dave Brubeck, huh?
Yeah.
Come on, clap. You know what it means when I clap, right? That's an important name.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
very cool.
Yeah. But while I'm there, between the pieces, for the break, I started talking to the wife of the guy who's playing. His sister, brother-in-law, and another friend were there, and I'm talking about jazz, and I'm telling them all about the Unconnoisseur. And the one guy says, "Well, have you heard the Squirrel Nut Zippers? Have you heard them?"
Yeah.
I saw their album, the album cover, and these are jazzy looking guys dressed in tuxedos with top hats. I didn't listen to a lot of it. And then another guy by the name of Stanley Jordan, a guitar player, young looking guitar player. And that was pretty doggone cool. So that's kind of my week in music,
Good.
Yeah.
I don't think the Squirrel Nut Zippers made the list in 99 or 2006.
No, I don't think they did. They could have.
Yeah, they could have. Yeah. So my week, I had the grand opportunity to go see the Three Rivers Big Band again, and they did Christmas. They did some Christmas songs. They mixed in some standard jazz tunes as well. But man, what a fun night hanging out with Kendra there and at the club room, listening to the Three Rivers Big Band. I just get all jazzed up, even leading up to Wednesday of the week that they perform at the club room. So, just being able to take a break from the Christmas decorations and the hustle and bustle of daily life, and just be able to go sit for a couple hours and listen to the Three Rivers Big Band was amazing. Then on Sunday morning, I got a text from Lady D saying that she was going to be doing a sit-in jazz combo down at a little venue downtown on Broadway. And I had never been to the venue before, as a bagel sandwich shop, which is, I've always wanted to go in, but that was just an excuse for me just to go and hear jazz. So sat in a real cool little back room there and listened to Lady D, a piano player and a bass player, just having fun, laying down some jazz, some trio combo work. So playing out of the fake book, and was one point the piano player, who was kind of in charge of the trio, he said, "Hey, we're gonna play this song," and Lady D said, "Well, I don't know that one, but I'll feel it. Just let's go. I'll feel it." And she did.
Yeah.
Nothing phases her. They were just having fun anyways. It was real low key, but it was fun just sitting there for an hour, listening to jazz.
Yep.
We had lunch with Uncle Ernie and Des today, and Uncle Ernie said something about he had seen Delaney playing, but he couldn't remember how he got it.
Because he follows me on TikTok, and I posted a couple of videos on TikTok at the Unconnoisseur. So I have a lot more videos that I haven't posted yet, but I'll post those throughout the rest of this week. I haven't done a lot of TikTok stuff lately, and I just figured what a great opportunity just to catch some minute and a half videos, post them up on TikTok. I got a lot of views actually, and a couple of comments on some of those videos, so I was real happy about that. Speaking of views and comments, Drew,
I want you to
go ahead.
I
was just going to say, I'm super excited because we laugh all the time that it's not about the numbers for us, but we're starting to get comments rolling in on the channel. It makes my heart swell just to know that you
Yeah.
guys are listening and paying attention and willing to ask questions. So if for whatever reason you got a question or you want to make a comment, please comment on the video, because that's just so cool to have that
Yep.
interaction with you guys.
And as of now recording it, I will have, by the time it comes out, I'm going to respond to the comments that we've got. A lot of it was on the John Coltrane Ascension album. Free jazz may not be for everybody, but it is for somebody. And so trying to understand what it is. Dad, you were not with us last week for the Peter Brotzman album.
Thank you.
And that's pushing the boundaries of what free jazz is. But even then, to see the comments rolling in, it just reminds me that we wanted to go on this journey because we wanted to get out of a musical rut, and we didn't know if the people were going to follow. It wasn't important to us at the time. It was important to share the jazz music and what we've learned to love and appreciate. And Ascension is tough. Some of the spiritual unity is tough. Brotzman, Art Ensemble is tough. But what one of the commenters said is when you go back later and listen to it, you've digested so much other jazz and you have a new appreciation for what you're listening to. And after Phil's comment about Art Ensemble of Chicago, imagine being there watching it. I may not have loved the music, but I guarantee it was a performance of epic proportion to watch. So, yeah, I wanted to bring that up tonight too, Matt. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing about my week in music.
Yeah.
Saturday night, we thought we were getting a package delivered. I opened the door, and it was a group of carolers.
Nice.
Mom and I both said, we've never been caroled before. And it was a group from church that it was so sweet, so nice. So
Nice.
they sang a couple songs, and we got to listen. We didn't have cookies for them or anything, but they gave us a bag of candy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was pretty
That's a
special.
Trick and a treat.
Yeah.
Trick and the treat. All right. Well, hey, why don't we yeah, that's great. Why don't we move into the slideshow? That way we can start the discussion on Coleman Hawkins. What do you think? You ready?
I think let's do it.
Okay. Here we go. Very first slide. Talk about it every week. Going to continue to do so till the end of the journey and beyond. Whatever you do, do it to jazz. And of course, this week, Coleman Hawkins, a retrospective 1929 to 1963 is the music that we'll be talking about. Excuse me. On the next slide, we've got the artwork. I kind of dig the artwork, believe it or not. Dad, what are your thoughts on the artwork?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, the color, the black and white, it looks it's so good. It's a good look for him. He's looking at us like, "Hey, come and join me in this adventure. I think you're going to like this." So, yeah, I like it.
Drew, what about you?
I saw it like an Andy Warhol. One of the things that I really appreciated the independent squares, but it's the same photograph broken up into smaller pieces.
Uh-huh.
And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and different colors.
Different colors.
I'm glad you said Andy Warhol because I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah. I look at it and think about it. It's the same Coleman Hawkins broken into many decades, broken into many small images. And that's what I thought about with the retrospect.
Yeah.
What about you, Matt?
That's,
What did you
that's a
see?
good way. Yeah, I liked it. You know, like Drew said, I was getting the whole Andy Warhol vibe with the different colors, and Warhol used kind of the same angle and the same photograph and just changed the colors. But I like Drew's description of it's the same picture. They just take a different section of the picture and highlight it with a different color. So I was digging that. So yeah, I really like the artwork. I really did. Next slide. I just picked a couple of really cool pictures of Coleman. The very top picture, Coleman Hawkins, and that is Sonny Rollins, who he hired, and Sonny's on the disc as well, the compilation, the retrospect disc that we'll be talking about. But and then they had a lifelong kind of friendship. Coleman was kind of a mentor to Sonny Rollins, kind of got him started in his career. Lower left picture, I love the caricature.
That is so cool.
I know, isn't that cool? I mean, it gets him. It gets his vibe. You can tell that it's Coleman Hawkins. It's not really a over dramatized caricature, even though it is a caricature. But Corey what is it? Corey Pike. That's Corey Pike's artwork. So I didn't do it. I was giving credit to Corey, but I just thought it was super cool anyways to be able to find a piece of art like that. Lower right hand corner picture is a little bit older, picture of Coleman, him with the sax in his mouth, the tenor sax in his mouth. I found it interesting. That's all. That's the reason I picked it. There was a lot of pictures, and believe it or not, Coleman Hawkins is the name of a basketball player as well. So, kind of had to sort through some pictures this week of basketball players and sax players. Cool. Anyways, let's move on to the next slide. Jazz lingo for the day. The term that I picked this week was go out. And no, I don't want to go out on a date with you, but go out in jazz to play notes outside of the key center, also called playing outside. And when we were kids, we did that a lot. We played outside, kicked a can and army. And,
sardines. Capture the flag.
Capture the flag. We did all of that, played outside. But on the piano, when I was practicing, I would also play outside because I couldn't, I was never very good reading the notes. So I just played something. So go out is the term.
Well, brother, I got to tell you, every time I start the solo on Sunday nights, I go out. I'm way out. So I know what that means.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Play outside.
That's awesome.
The key center.
Cool. Let's move on to the next slide where you can get it. This week's album, as we spoke about earlier, this week's album can be found on YouTube, but I don't think it can, and I didn't cross it out, even though I should have.
I'll put a big cross in it now.
Yeah, put a big cross through it now. LP and CD. And basically, like we said before, I jumped on Discogs and ordered the CD. It was like $9 or $10, $11 for the double CD set, but I had to wait for it to get shipped, and that way I got to listen to it, and Drew and I got to listen to it. The quote on the bottom of the slide, I love the quote. Absolutely love the quote. It sums up jazz and how everyone should think of jazz anyways. If you don't make mistakes, you aren't really trying.
Amen.
A couple of weeks ago with one of the artists, his quote was, "You're making the wrong mistakes." Right?
Thelonious Monk.
Yep, Thelonious.
Is that
Monk.
who that was?
Yeah. Yeah, he said you're doing everything. You're making all the wrong mistakes. This week, Coleman says, if you don't make mistakes, you aren't really trying. So I like the attitude in that quote. Let's move on to the information slide, and we'll just talk a little bit about Coleman Hawkins. Coleman was born in 1904, passed away in 1969. That made him 64 years old. Some of the influences that I found, he started playing the piano at age 4. He moved to the cello at age 7, and then finally moved to the sax at age 9. That was kind of his musical initiation. I couldn't find too many other influences for Coleman because he's known as the father of the tenor sax in jazz. Yep. So for him to have an influence, maybe another alto sax player, or did you find anything, Drew?
I was looking at that. In his earlier years, there was some of those. He never listed him as influence. Nobody ever listed him as influence. And so there were the people that he played with in the different groups. The weird part is that if you think about the tenor sax becoming a good vehicle, and it says it in the magazine, I'll bring that up later, some of those influences would have been cornet players.
Mm-hmm.
And we did read a little bit about that this morning with Pops being an influence on him, and maybe not on him directly or personally, but he started to pull in Pops's trumpet sound onto the tenor saxophone as a soloist. So that could be a crossover that Louis Armstrong did influence him a little bit, and you can hear some of that because this is 1929. It covers 29 to 63, so you can hear a tinge of that in those, but it didn't list it as necessarily an influence.
Right.
So if anybody out there does see, Dad?
I saw something that referenced Buster Bailey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Art Tatum. Is that
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you were on the Art Tatum show, weren't you?
by Sid Bochet, Bochet,
Sidney Bechet.
Yeah.
Fletcher Henderson. He was influenced by those.
And he played with Fletcher's group early on, and so it probably doesn't surprise me that Fletcher Henderson would have been or could have been. Yeah.
Okay.
Those are names I found.
Cool. Let's move on to the discography. Now, Google AI tricked me again this week. When I ran my Google AI search, it told me he had like 129 albums, and he very well may have 129. But when I'm looking on Wikipedia and Discogs and Google AI, the numbers don't match up. On Wikipedia, I counted 45. Okay, that's kind of what I'm going to go with. 45 studio albums, and then as a sideman, there's just way too many to count. So I just put many aside. So.
And I want to touch on that. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The reason we're talking about Pops is that we just did several hours of him for the Hot 5 and Hot 7 albums. So that's where we're at personally on our journey. Spoiler
coming up much later. Yeah,
much later.
Yeah,
but I had to remember that in 1929, these were single, maybe double-sided. So what is an album per se in 1929? What is an album in 25? And it would have been two sides, an A and a B, and maybe if you can catch that red light in time, there'd be 4 songs on a record. So
so the Discogs listing 170 records may be accurate because
how many presses were made of his on the records, and then how many of them when they went to 10-inch or 12-inch extended play or long play, how many of those were recut? So historically it gets into that weird place. How do you justify, and how many songs are on an album for a disc? 10, 12, unless you're playing the Cone concert when it's just 4 long songs that are 45 minutes. I'm going to mention that album every week from here on out. I love that. Keith Jarrett Cone concert.
Which is coming up much later.
Lots of spoilers. I'll sit down and shut up now.
It's about time.
The genre that I've got listed for Coleman is jazz, swing, and bebop. Now, coming up here right in the known for, we'll talk about the bebop. So he was known... Music was his life since the age of 14. Well, even before that, because he started piano at 4 and cello at 7, and then finally moved to the sax at age 9. But in the wiki, it said that he really kind of let go and just did music full time, starting at the age of 14. Got to imagine back in 29, maybe mom and dad don't care as much and kind of shoo him out of the house. He's ready to fly at age 14, so he goes and gets a job playing music. He did play with Pops in the Fletcher Henderson Orchestra, so Pops being an influence on him, I can completely see that where it would be an influence playing with Louis Armstrong. Finally, in the 40s, he moved on to be a big band leader of his own. So he led his own band or combos or trios or whatever he was doing in the 40s. He recorded, some say, the first bebop session with Dizzy, Don Byas, Max Roach, and many others in 1954. So the start of bebop. Okay, he's already his kind of nickname or whatever is the father of the tenor saxophone. Then you could really just call him the father of bebop too, or being there at the inception of bebop, playing with Dizzy and Don Byas and Max Roach.
And I think that there was a lot that we've talked about in the retrospective album. It doesn't quite cover the bebop. It does not share much of his time with Roy Eldridge. And so there's a lot missing on the retrospective that isn't covered through 63, but I think that he was one of the innovators in pushing the boundaries for the bebop that came out. That's why I ended up listening to the complete Diz, the complete RCA Victor. He's on 1 through 6 on that song, and back in Bean's Bag with Hawk and Clark Terry.
Yeah.
So I wanted to hear what his sound really was, and Dad's going to talk about that in a little bit because he didn't have access to this 2 CD collection, so he checked some other things out. But I think he was instrumental in the bebop. I don't think people give him enough credit on that.
But we don't hear it a lot on the retrospect. That's that point, and I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, you don't hear the bebop sound so much.
Yeah.
6 Degrees is real easy because we talked about Dizzy Gillespie. So Coleman Hawkins played with Dizzy. Dizzy, of course, was a big collaborator with Miles Davis. So got 1 degree, I guess. Let's finish out the slideshow with Today in Jazz History. By the way, Merry Christmas. If you're sitting watching The Unconnoisseur on Christmas Day, thanks for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. I may not
Merry Christmas.
I may not even watch our episode on Christmas Day, but in case you do, today's December 25th. Today, Kid Ory was born in 1886. He's not on this album, but he was. We talked about him this morning. We talked about Kid Ory a little bit this morning on our personal journey. Also, Cab Calloway was born in 1907. Do you remember what instrument he was? I know the name, but I can't think of what he played. Do you remember? Dad, have you heard the name Cab Calloway?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right.
I know that he was a singer and a band leader. I don't know if he actually played, but he was a regular performer at the Cotton Club in Harlem. I do know that.
All right.
Let's see. Wiki says singer and band leader.
Singer and band leader.
Yep.
1907. So the quote to round out the slideshow, the final quote by Coleman Hawkins: I made the tenor sax. Nobody plays like me, and I don't play like anyone else.
Man.
Again, we talked about him being the godfather of tenor, and I just sums it up.
Dad's going to have that quote in a little bit, but there's a lot of quotes in it. One of them that sticks out to me is, as if Adolph Sax made the tenor for Hawk. When he picked it up, he decided to play it differently. And he played it not like most of the players of the time as if it's a clarinet. He played it with the soul. And I think that's what began to step out, is he had a particular way that he wanted to hear something. And I wrote this down. Historically, let's see, the tenor sax is one of the oh, my bad. That's a whole different thing. What it was is like the flugelhorn to me, a dark and rich tone coming out of a tenor sax, and he made it sing. I was looking at Adolph Sax, my notes on that from that week. The tenor sax is one of the family of 14 instruments designed and constructed in 1864 by Adolph Sax. Designed to carry between the woodwinds and the brass instruments. And that was it. Husky yet bright tone. That's how it was described. And I think it's fair that that's the tenor saxophone.
Yeah. So before Fletcher, or not Fletcher, why did I say Fletcher? Before Coleman, there really wasn't tenor sax in jazz. We're talking clarinet. We're talking banjo, clarinet, tuba. Clarinet was pretty much it.
Trombone, maybe trombone,
kid, yeah.
And clarinet or trumpet.
And what you found is a lot of them played the tenor saxophones as a darker sound, but it was much like a clarinet. So I'm gonna own a trumpet, but I'm gonna play it like it's a flute. That's kind of the jive that was going on. And he said, no, let's treat it as its own. And Dad's quote, and I'll find it here in a little bit, but the president, not Clinton, the president of the tenor, they used to refer to him as that. He said, I'm not it. The godfather, the OG player, the tenor saxophone is Hawk. And so I think that's valid to say. Made bebop happen. I think he was an instigator of that, and the tenor sax hit the scene. Just like my boy Clark Terry.
That's right.
Brought the flugelhorn to jazz.
That's right.
I think it is interesting how jazz music transitioned from the clarinet that took almost center stage, but then it became not overnight. It wasn't an overnight succession, but it became a standard for jazz music. That's pretty interesting, actually, to me.
Yeah.
Matt, You want to talk about Jeanette? You want to tell him why?
Drawing a blank.
Historically, playing into a horn, you had to have instruments that would stand out. A banjo stands out. A clarinet stands out. A trumpet stands out. A tuba versus a trombone, but those will stand out.
Well, or a tuba, even a upright bass. You need that tuba to stand out.
Yeah, but an upright bass wasn't going to cover it.
Mm-mm.
And then in the late 20s, 28, microphones started to get available. So they could play quieter instruments to get to stand out. That's one reason. But then the others are the musical instruments and the adaptations and the desire to add textures and sounds. And the saxophone been around. It had been played by bands for a long time, but never in jazz.
All right, Drew, let me ask you, and we're not wrapping up or anything, but what was your overall impression of the album? Did you I'm sure you made a lot of notes of the retrospect.
I did. I'm going to leave those sit off to the side. I don't want to read them. Going back through it yesterday, just to hear 3 hours from beginning to end. There were some songs and some recordings that you made, I'm not sure about it. Then there were others that just hit really hard. So many jazz classics or jazz standards came out of his book of work, whether arranged by him or arranged by others. This album, I would say, take a bite at a time. You got to take it in bite-sized morsels, but being able to hear it from beginning to end, a gargantuan meal, you begin to hear the collection and why they would want to put it together to really display Coleman Hawkins' ability. Where the saxophone hit jazz, why it hit jazz, his tone, his style, his vibrato with it, his virtuosity with it. The album to me was a great collection of his talents. A lot to consume, but from beginning to end to be able to consume it that way, you get to hear what it really is. And it is a phenomenal body of work.
Yeah.
I liked it.
So in my notes, I made notes for disc 1 and disc 2. In disc 1, I said there wasn't many dynamics. You didn't get the highs and the lows, probably because of the recording, the equipment. We're still in the late 2020s, moving into the 30s. I also said there wasn't much phrasing. There was a lot of notes, but the phrasing wasn't there yet. We're still kind of in the ragtime. You got 2.5 minutes, and once you get done, you get done. Phrasing for me is a big thing because you got the beginning of the story, you got the meat, and then you got the end of the story where you can wrap everything up and be done. Still, it seemed like a bit of bumps, and you had to stop the song. For me, that's just for me. I said it was like reading a paragraph without punctuation. All the songs, they kind of flowed into one another. Yes, they were designed well to flow in like that, but and then I asked the question, are these the best representation of these years from Coleman Hawkins? Probably, but I wasn't digging on disc 1 as much as I was digging on disc 2. I said in disc 2, he finally is coming into his own. You can hear the phrasing, you can hear the dynamics, you can hear the artistry, you can hear the craftsmanship beginning to develop in his work. And that's what got me, was the craftsmanship and the creativity. Okay. That's what got me with disc 2. So I enjoyed the second disc a lot more than the first disc. Then in my notes, of course, I made the reminds me of the Little Rascals and Sweet William Now by Van Halen. Anytime I hear this era of music, Sweet William Brown from Van Halen comes to my mind automatically. And it's a great song. And yes, it's Van Halen, but they moved to that jazz side with the clarinet, the electric guitar, and the singer, and it blows me away. But that's old style music. So done by a new band, I guess, in the 70s and 80s. So
Flappers. That's all I could think about through the first CD. Mm-hmm. You wanted to dance to it like that, but it was. Dad didn't get to listen to this album specifically, but what was your take on his body of work that you did get to listen to?
Yeah, I listened to mostly his early works, and you mentioned Flappers. I was listening to an album that was RCA, and they had a slideshow, and all through the music they showed the slides of these Dapper Dan guys dressed in tuxedo type stuff with what they put over their shoes, the white covering over their shoes,
Yeah.
and dressed with hot top hats, and these women, Dapper Dans and Flapper women.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was listening to that album, or that music. Then I listened to something called Stampede, which was a really melodious kind of thing, and flowed just gently. Yeah, there was so many things I listened to with Coleman. Crazy Rhythm and Honeysuckle Rose was a sweet song. Again, very melodious. It definitely was in the 20s, late 20s. But then Body and Soul, that whole piece. In fact, that is referred to by and somebody said Hawkins recordings currently available, and Eddie Jefferson said in his vocalese version of Body and Soul that Hawkins was the king of the saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes out pretty strong, pretty heavy. He was just a superb musician, and he could play it in any kind of style practically. So the early stuff was light and airy and melodious, and then rhythmic, and then he got into later years. I'm sure you heard that on retrospective.
Mm-hmm.
A little harder, more, well, not harsh, but harder driving kind of music. So yeah, so I really appreciated it.
It reminds me, Body and Soul. We had talked about it earlier. Dad, do you want to play that audio clip, Body and Soul, so that we can hear what his playing really is about?
Yeah. Where are we starting? Like a 1 minute or so?
About 1:30,
okay,
right before his solo kicks in.
Yep.
I think that it helps with that.
Yeah.
Okay, Body and Soul is song number 16 on disc number 2. So
yes,
you said I'm sorry, you said 1:30. Okay. What
a great representation of his ability on that song. Now that's Body and Soul, but there is an album, Body and Soul, and I'll drop that up here right now, that slide up here, so that you can see what that album is. But this is one of the songs off of the album. You said number 15 on disc 1.
Yeah, 16 on disc 1.
16 on disc 1.
Yep.
Truly.
Okay. All right.
Do you want to just run through the...
Yeah, let's run through the clips real quick. So do you want to go next, or you want me to go next?
You go.
All right. So the clip that I picked on disc 2, song number 3, was Indiana Winter. That one hit me. That one hit me for a lot of reasons. It's funny because, I still laugh at the story that we told about Bix Beiderbecke and him playing in the fields at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it's cold and freezing. we know what an Indiana winter is like, and it's cold. And
Yep.
But Indiana winter, you hear. I believe it's Dizzy playing the trumpet on this one. I love the trumpet solo. Yes, Coleman shines on the song, but I like Dizzy solo on Indiana winter. So let's start that clip right at about 35 seconds. Let's play about 45 seconds. So start at 35 and play about 45.
Okay. Yeah, that is jamming. That is jamming. And so while we're here, I wanted to hear the next song on that album one, Indian Winter. I'm sorry, Indian Summer.
Summer. Mm-hmm.
Indiana Winter is what we just heard. Indian Summer is what I want to hear. And if we start at the very beginning of that, it just, for me, it's about Coleman.
Okay.
What is that tenor? And then I found the quote I was looking for earlier. So,
all right, here we go. Right at the beginning.
all right. Yeah.
You're right. You can really start to hear him develop. And again, my notes on disc one were, not so great. My notes on disc two, but you can hear him start to develop his own style and the way that he plays the tenor, and he just shines. He shines on that number.
Yes. The quote I wanted to look for, and I did find it. Fellow saxophonist Lester Young, known as the president of the tenor saxophone, commented in 1959 in an interview for the Jazz Review, "As far as I'm concerned, I think Coleman Hawkins was the president. First right. As for myself, I think I'm the second one." And the quote that comes after that, Miles Davis once said, "When I heard Hawk, I learned to play ballads." And so true in all of those clips. When you hear his style, his ability, he's turned that saxophone into an instrument of vocalizing. Soul is coming through, body and soul.
And speaking of that, the ballad, the album or the track called 1 Hour, definitely you get the ballad sound. It is so smooth. And you just, I fell in love with it. It's called 1 Hour.
1 hour.
Yeah. And Red McKenzie, in 25, he says that he cut his first classic ballad. That is Hawkins did. So
in 25.
I would encourage the listeners to check that out. It's called 1 Hour.
1 hour.
Yeah.
Cool. Here's what else I found interesting. On the retrospective double CD number 2, song number 17 is Watermelon Man. Now, if we're talking about the retrospective coming out up until 1963. Herbie Hancock wrote that song in 1963, so that was a new number for Coleman and the guys to play. So if you get a chance to check out Watermelon Man Coleman Hawkins version, I looked it up. Now on the wiki page for Watermelon Man, it says it's been a jazz standard and has been recorded over 200 times. It doesn't specifically list Coleman Hawkins playing it. Groups like Foreplay, Rick Braun, David Benoit, David Bowie's band are listed, but not Coleman Hawkins. So I just found it interesting that they actually were playing a new tune in '63 from my man Herbie, and they decided to keep that in the compilation. So I just thought it was cool. Watermelon Man.
Mm-hmm. I love that track, by the way. And you had brought it up right before we hit record. You think he says, "Hey, there's Clark Terry."
Yeah. Clark Terry, lay it down. He says something like that, and it's a.
I'm really gonna cool. When we're finished here, I'm gonna tune it in and see if I can't find it.
Good.
It would, the way he plays, it wouldn't surprise me one bit that you've got a trumpet player and a sax player that can lay out some soul like that. Why wouldn't they have?
Right.
Watermelon Man's not exactly that ballad music, but it is certainly a fun tune.
Yes. Yes.
So, Dad, what are some of your other thoughts
about Coleman?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so very impressed with every one of the pieces that I heard. And if I could go back in history, he started with what's her name, Mamie Smith.
Yeah.
And it definitely has a vaudeville sound to it.
Yeah.
And she was I think the recording is that she was the first Black female to be recorded. And he's playing his saxophone with her.
Yep.
And I listened to one of the songs, several of them, in fact, but one of them was the Golfing Papa.
Yep.
There are some funny names, aren't there? These tracks sometimes are really named really funny.
Yeah, but I wouldn't suggest our viewers who have tender ears to listen to Golfing Papa, because there's some undertone about that. She wants him to come home.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't want him out playing golf. So
yeah, and the magazine, that's the cool thing about the Jazzwise magazine, is that the article that they put together in here, although it's short and brief, key figure in music's evolution. Hawkins was the first person to make the tenor saxophone sound like a convincing vehicle for jazz, and for 2 decades was a dominant influence on other practitioners. And I wrote down some of those people who did get influenced by him. I'll share that in a moment.
Yeah.
Touring from the age of 16 with blues singer Mamie Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And then touring and being with Fletcher Henderson. Out to Europe for 5 years, returning as a hero in 1939, influencing new ideas of bebop. And then that's when I saw it in the article, 1995 is when RCA put that album together. So it was from 1995. But here's a small list of people who were influenced by Hawk and played the tenor sax. Lester Young, Ben Webster, Dexter Gordon, Wardell Gray, Stan Getz, Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, Wayne Shorter, Michael Brecker, and Chris Potter, and many, many more. And these weren't just sax players, but because of his evolution with the tenor sax, every tenor player that came after that is looking at how to play like that. Not necessarily how to play like him, but they all got lessons from him. Trumpet players go back to Pops. If we could only replicate a sound like that, wouldn't we? Hit 200 high C's in a row. So just one of those random things that a lot of tenor sax players that came after him are looking for that sound of tenor sax.
you said he went to Europe and spent time over in Europe when he came back to America. But you gotta wonder if his outreach was even more than that. I mean, number 98 talked about Kamasi Washington. Kamasi had to have listened to Coleman Hawkins. You don't necessarily hear the influence in Kamasi, but you got to imagine that you hear Kamasi play and you think that's maybe what Coleman sounded like back.
But with Kamasi, think about changing of the guards and in his references and the vocals about changing of it. Or it was the NPR video on Kamasi when he says, I've had this vision, this idea that it's time for a change of the guards. Were the old guards somebody like Hawk? And I keep wanting to say Bean, because that was one of the other nicknames he has.
Yep.
Maybe from his head being shaped like a bean. This is Hawk or Bean. But do you suppose that Hawk was one of those old guard tenor sax players that Kamasi had always had this vision? I've got to go up to the mountain and I'm going to take over for the guards because now it's the changing of the guards. Is it Hawk?
Coltrane.
So
Larry Young. Shorter.
Yeah. Brecker.
Yeah.
There's some other names too, including Art Pepper.
Yep.
Illinois Jockey. I'm not.
Hey, Ron.
That's right. Jockey. And you said Charlie Parker, J.J. Johnson. And Zoot Sims.
Zoot, yeah.
Do we know Zoot?
Not yet.
Know of, but I don't. Yeah, in our list,
through rabbit holing, yes, we've come across Zoot.
Speaking about rabbit holing,
Uh-oh.
This was the week that I read in Wayne Shorter's book the quote. There's a lot of shortisms. There are two rabbit holes. One rabbit hole that you run down, and another rabbit hole that you fall down. You remember that quote from that? That's going way back. Dad, you were getting ready to say something, but
no, but I've heard that. I think I've heard it before from you guys.
Yeah, for sure. All right, hey, let's do final thoughts so that we can move on to next week's artist. Dad, what's your final thoughts on Coleman Hawkins?
Unfortunately, I was not able to listen to retro, but the other music I listened to by Hawkins, by the Bean, was fabulous. I will listen to his stuff on an ongoing basis. I am so impressed with his style, his rhythm, the melodious kind of flow that he has. So, yeah, I respect this jazz artist big time.
Oh. If even though you didn't get to listen to the retrospective album, if you were to score or rate Coleman Hawkins, what number would you give him between 1 and 10?
9.
Dang.
9.
That's a banging number.
Yeah, 9.
That's a banging. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do my final thoughts next. I enjoyed the time that I got to listen to Coleman. Of course, we had to switch artists around. We're coming off of two really, really banging artists going into the Coleman Hawkins week, and it's not in this order that you're watching it on YouTube. So the next two artists we've already done, and then you come into Coleman Hawkins. So it affected my week of listening to Coleman Hawkins and rating Coleman Hawkins. That's all I'm going to say. I didn't bix the score. The score that I gave was fair for the time. Even for this week, I'm sure I would change the score, but we had a ton of music in our ears this week, both from Coleman and from our personal journey artists, and it just became a little overwhelming which one to pick and how much to listen to at one time. I rated the retrospect album at a straight 5. That's as high as I could go. I'm not sure that I feel like I bixed him, but I'm not sure I could go much higher even today. Drew, final thoughts.
I'm giving a moment of silence for that because we talk about it a lot. Our week of music is important. It shapes what we're listening to, how we're listening to it, the week leading up to it. I'm going to introduce the album here in just a moment, and imagine coming off of this to listen to some dusty box record from 1929. Sometimes it's the recording that impacts the way we listen to the music. Sometimes it's our week. Sometimes it's just our flavor for the day. And when we're coming off of some real heavy bebop, coming into some dusty albums from 1929 can be tough. My final thought is that Coleman Hawkins is really the father of tenor saxophone. And as much as I love to hear the sound of a tenor saxophone, it really did shake my world. I think Coleman Hawkins is somebody that everybody needs to put in their ears at any given time. Maybe not 4 hours straight or 3 hours straight of it, but at least do it. I set that all up to say that I think that, Matt, I did Bix it. I didn't know this time last year what we were in for, and giving it a fair shake yesterday, just straight uninterrupted listening, but I gave it a 6. I would have given it an 8, maybe even a little higher after really reviewing what the historical impact was. It starts on the tenor saxophone there.
I get it. And had we come off of Peter Brotzman straight into Coleman Hawkins, he probably would have gotten a better for me too.
We'd have probably been much higher.
Much higher. But the way that we did it,
we didn't even come off of this week's album. We came off of 2 albums after this.
2 albums after that. So we had 2 way better, in my opinion, way better artists. And then you go back to Coleman Hawkins. And again, it's just, it is what it is. We don't change our scores. We never have, and hopefully we never will. I'm sticking with.
But we realize that there may be some things that we missed.
Yes.
Can I introduce next week's album?
Yes.
I've been giddy from the day we flipped this open.
I'm not going to take this away from you.
And I saw this orange and yellow cover. I about flipped a lid. As I'm learning to play the trumpet, there are some really banging trumpet players out there. And this week's album coming up, number 51, is Clifford Brown and the Max Roach Quintet. Album's just simply called Clifford Brown and Max Roach. It came out on MRC label on LP and CD, and it's recorded in 1954. It features Clifford Brown on trumpet, Max Roach on drums, Harold Land on tenor sax, and Richie Powell on piano, George Morrow on bass. And there's a lot of history to unpack in one album. Beyond the music and the digging, I dug, and I'm still digging on Clifford Brown.
Clifford's your guy. Him and CT.
CT, baby.
Are your favorite. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. So you're going to be all jacked up next week for recording Clifford.
Oh, I am.
Max Roach. Dad, I think you're going to dig this because Max Roach is an amazing drummer, amazing band leader. Yeah. So you're going to dig this album.
Do you think we'll get a chance to talk next week, Matt?
Nah.
Huh? If we do it on our normal night, we can.
No. He's talking about me. Will I ever shut up?
Oh yeah. No, we may not get a chance to talk. I may just hold up my fingers and what my rating is that week. Keep going, Drew. Here's my rating.
Yeah.
Oh man, what an album and what a musician.
Looking forward to it.
Richie Powell, his piano playing at that time, Harold Land on tenor. So now that we're coming off of Coleman in tenor, you get to really put a blend to it. But we had this album and still one more before we get to Hawk. So yeah, it was weird messing this up. So
yeah, for sure.
All right.
Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us. Drew, why don't you tell them where they can find out more about us?
Well, each week you can always find us at our website, theunconnoisseur.com. A lot of great information loaded up there. Our ratings are always up there, so you can take a look. Our email address is on there as well, but you can always email us at theunconnoisseur@gmail.com. Check out Matt over on the TikTok, and we'll have some shorts coming out pretty soon, as well as some more information on YouTube. For all of y'all on the podcast, thanks so much for tuning in on that. We're at Spotify, iTunes, and then we are also on the Spotify. That's it. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. And continue to drop the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are on every album that we review.
Have a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, y'all.
Merry Christmas.
Blessings.
Bird turds.